Take a seat anywhere.
All right.
We're waiting for him still, so.
Okay, we understand there's a fee.
Uh-huh.
Okay, do we pay you for that?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Okay. You take a check?
I do.
I'll pay yours for your gas over. No, no.
Is there a pen in here?
I've got one right. I'm Master Gardener.
Okay.
They announced class in our meeting.
Yeah, it's weird that Dr. Buchanan isn't here yet. He's always early.
Who?
Ray Buchanan, Dr. Buchanan. He's the one that normally puts this on.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Tall guy,
I don't know.
glasses.
Maybe I do.
He's probably the one that announced this class because he's the one that's been getting in contact with me, letting me know that you all
Okay,
are coming
yeah.
and stuff like that. So when you see him, but
Yeah.
maybe.
I have met so many new people since I got into Master Gardener.
Mhm.
So it's,
That's good.
no, by the way, happy birthday. Oh, thank you.
Oh, happy birthday.
You try to forget them. I'll make it out too.
To Ollie, Olli.
Well, tell me, what all goes on in the building?
So we have CTC, which is the community college. We have Texas Tech, which, so community college here does freshman, sophomore college classes. And then Texas Tech handles the junior, senior, sophomore, so 3 and 4 levels.
Okay.
And then we're here only for lifelong learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
No graduate classes,
No.
just undergraduate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm on the line ladies.
You walked right past it.
I am always on the lookout for those.
I'm gonna follow you just to see if I can find any of our people. Community college, where this is right? No. Been a lot of stuff. So that's what you guys are. And you must reports to here as well as a sector of the young one. So if I was to bring these two ways in your knowledge is the whole system, what would be the best way to do your work? Coming in on field, they have a lot of.
These are nice classrooms.
Yeah, they are.
Nothing we ever had.
No, no, we didn't have air conditioning when I went to school. So all the windows were always open.
A Facebook page or somewhere where you have your calendar.
No,
I saw you on LinkedIn that I didn't.
that's the only thing I maintain is a LinkedIn account. It is, me and Facebook never got along. I
have-
saw ways Facebook was being used, which wasn't right. I'm one of those people, I'm not on Facebook. When I was
Yeah.
working for
Hear me in the
extension service, I
classroom?
had to be, it was a requirement. And the day I retired, I was sat down at a computer and completely dismantled the whole site. Stuck it down
Your retirement gift to yourself.
to myself. I got really. Totally good.
Are you doing? Hi, are you
Hi,
waiting?
I'm waiting.
I'm Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Nice to meet you. I'm gonna sneak around. you.
Okay.
I don't think y'all can hear me in there.
There are 3 little presentations on this drive.
Okay.
There's a bunch on it. but
Okay,
One of them, of course, is famous trees.
okay.
It's about this book.
Perfect.
The second one. Get loaded up.
Which? Freaking out, we got 2.
It takes our $10.
Me. Whenever you have a moment. Okay, famous trees.
Famous trees is the first one,
Okay,
followed by tree diseases.
are we doing all of these
No,
today?
no, we're
Okay.
only doing 3 of them.
Okay.
No, we don't have that much time.
Let's see, this says PowerPoint found a problem with tree diseases. PowerPoint can attempt to repair the presentation if you trust the source.
So just tell it, that's fine, tell it to do it.
And it says it can't.
That gives you the age of that presentation.
Okay, well, it won't
Old
pull
as the
up.
trees, huh?
No,
It will not let you load it,
it
huh?
will not.
Where?
There you
Oh, wow.
are.
Finally.
It'll be a shorter program then. If we, I'll just do it without the program.
Okay.
How are
How
you?
you doing?
Good, see you. Good. Good.
Is there another one?
Okay,
Hello, hello.
try the Rotarian tree planter.
Yep, that
How
works.
are you doing?
I'm good.
Tree diseases, man,
All right.
that's bad.
Hi.
It will not open.
Sign
Okay.
that list?
This-
No. We don't do it. It's too hard to differentiate between online and in person.
Oh.
Yeah. So which
Well,
one
that'll make tree diseases actually more interesting. We're just gonna follow a format. We'll just talk about the bad guys.
are we starting with this one?
We'll start with that one.
Okay. And I'll be in the other room.
And at some point, I need the Texas Forest Service website pulled up.
Okay.
And there's a site in there called
Texas
Famous Trees of Texas.
Forest. You
In
might,
fact,
you might need to do that. Let me get you all set up on Zoom.
I have done this for crowds before where they say, can I get a copy of the website? Well,
Perfect.
here it is, if you want to cut those up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, that's a tedious way to go to a website.
You'll all kind of.
I can also email it too if I get all the email addresses.
I just knew it was here. Had you paid?
Not yet.
I've got money in my pocket.
I'll take it as soon. Do you want to?
Maybe go ahead and take the.
Sure.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yes. I just brought that one later, and the stuff on the back.
What was the website you said? Texas?
It's called Texas Forest Service and it's, they have a link where you do a search and then we only just put famous trees in Texas and you'll pull this book up. If this is an important part of the presentation because you can't get this book anymore
Oh,
and it's online.
and you said famous trees.
Famous
You
trees.
guys can say.
All right.
And then you can find it,
Okay.
maybe. I'm gonna go check my,
Yeah, you go do that and I'll.
I'm gonna talk, so if you don't hear me, then it's not working.
Okay.
had a fall.
No.
When y'all talk, if y'all talk,
On your
careful
trip.
that you use these. We have people out in Zoom world, they think.
You know, my blood pressure got to go, down in the bathroom. Fracture the rib and
No.
hip and shoulder and,
You need to make sure you use them.
yeah.
How are you? Good, how are you?
All
I
right.
was getting ready to call on you, I was like, they're on.
Yeah.
You're never.
I left the house and got to the gate. I said, I forgot something. They go back
You're back.
and I'm back. You need this lectern. Wait, do you want this?
I won't need it.
Okay,
No, I'll just
that's fine.
kind of a free bird.
Okay, can you hear me in here?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
This is a great talk. I'm so glad that you're ready to come do this. Hello. How are you doing? You've signed up all that. You signed up online.
Where's the website that we sign up? You said signing up online. It's
It's in there somewhere.
It's in
I'm
here.
not sure. You signed up at already somewhere?
No, I just, heard about it last month, Semester Gardener.
Yeah, that's what it's
So,
okay. So
I just
yeah,
did that.
you owe $10. It's a $10 fee.
I paid it.
That's good. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, take that catalog into the place to sign up there.
Yeah, this is great. I didn't know it was even exist.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't know.
So many say that. And we've got
You-
some
have you
great.
signed up?
programs.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I see a lot of things in here I'd like to do.
There's a wine and cheese thing coming up in
Yes.
early October that was really good.
It's.
What magazine is that?
Do what?
What magazine is that?
This is the catalog.
Oh,
Take one.
You need
Yeah.
one?
oh,
I got one. Catalog report.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good
take
sitting
that.
here. We have a podium if you want to stand out here.
I can just do it right here.
Okay.
How many are?
It'll help me be able to look
online?
at some of this stuff.
Hello? Have you signed up ahead of time?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and you, good to see you. Good to see you.
Okay, advance with this. This is,
Do you have a copy of the
No, you
catalog?
just have to do it this
Okay,
way.
back over.
Well, I
don't
just-
worry about that one.
Okay,
Don't worry about it. That's just my back.
So you're right here. Just make sure you click on it if you click off of it. And then when you share this, we have to switch screens, but
Okay.
I'm gonna be following along with my
That'll be the way.
office.
That'll be-
Okay, perfect. So when you go to switch PowerPoint, if you want to give a moment to ask me, for them to ask questions or something, they'll give me time to come in here and switch your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So far, you only have one out in Zoom world, so,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's in Zoom.
Zoom world.
Yeah. 2nd of October.
Yeah.
Fine.
I'm glad I retired.
The strange time. Yeah.
Right.
My employer had
The
people.
art of cheese and wine area. I bet it's gonna be
Right, my bad.
I understand that you want to take this, that, 19 signed up for the cheese.
Everybody up on this?
And you want more.
You know, that's good. I guess it's for
So here's our list.
the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make sure you use this.
And I introduce him and I just stand up there.
Make sure you have it. Well, no, because see where the camera is? The camera's over where he is.
Is this just a microphone?
It is. Yeah. Mhm.
So I need this.
Uh-huh.
Where
There's only one out so
Oh,
far.
hi there.
How are you?
You guys are back.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, good. You all signed up, for you?
Yes, they are.
All right.
I got you.
You, it's
Thank
time
you.
for the wine and cheese up there.
We need one more.
Yeah.
That's what we're serving after this program, right?
Right.
You're in the program.
We can do that too. I have no problem with that.
You go.
Oh,
It's in there.
I signed up and.
Make sure you're talking to this, please.
For.
You always have.
No,
Yes.
You don't sign up?
No, yes.
Okay, Sarah.
See the catalog?
Well, open up your phone or. I didn't bring it with me.
No,
Sarah.
Anything else?
I got her.
Case
She's
you
on.
need them.
I got her.
He's got their tag on that.
Medicare.
Here, he said, picture of Robert Architect. You know, tag, you know, that's keeping it alive. So, they got bell around his neck.
Don't forget your second one.
Right.
It's all.
We tried.
I had to push this.
No, it's on.
Since you brought us in, right?
It was one that we probably never did, but we just played under. We're kind of reverent. We thought it was just a reverend tree, and we didn't want to bother it.
Right.
Especially build a tree house in it. We didn't know to do that.
Yeah. It was a deer blind, wasn't it?
You gonna stand over there?
I can, you know, Ray, I can kind of go anywhere. Actually, I need to move this presentation forward. So yeah, I'll probably just stand right here.
Okay. That's.
I found out, I've done these before, you do get somewhere to try to stay. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and admit.
If you move around, they've got to follow.
I know, I just like Zoom, but just for that reason.
But it's good to hydrate.
Hey, how are you? You know, someone asked me a minute ago, do I have a Facebook page? I want to encourage everybody, when you get home, if you're on Facebook, go look up Wade Hibler. It's going to scare you to death when you find this guy.
Really?
I found out he's in Austria is where he's at.
I'm not kidding.
And
That way to Hitler, huh?
he's pretty exotic.
I'll be darned.
I thought, man, people are looking up Wade Hibler on Facebook, and they're seeing there going, man, he changed a lot from when he was
Listen, how long were you extension agent?
35 years,
5 years.
most of them in Burnett County,
Most of them.
22 of them in Burnett County.
Well, it's 2:00. Shall we begin?
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Aha, 6 there and. okay.
6 online. Okay, I'll try to just stay in one spot.
Can
That's
y'all
good.
hear us okay? Can y'all hear us? Anybody?
Can anybody hear it?
Either they can or they
Okay.
can't.
Hello.
Okay, I hear you. Good. Leon, can you hear us?
I hear, I'm
Okay,
fine.
perfect. All righty.
Right, let's begin. I'm very pleased to, very pleased to introduce Wade Hibler. He is actually the brightest man that I know about nature and the environment, I think that I've ever known. But combined with that is a real passion for nature, for its future, its intricacies, its beauty, and the impact it has on all of our lives. And as AgriLife Extension Agent for 35 years, most of it here in Burnett County, he conveyed these two wonderful knowledge and caring to the farmers and the ranchers, to the 4-H kids, and to the FFA kids. But he also wanted to extend that knowledge. And so he actually founded the Master Naturalist Group here in Vernon County which now must number, I think it's been about 20 years, if you count 20 or 25 per year. That's almost 500 people.
1999 to present.
That's it. And then he also founded the Master Gardeners. So you will find that he is not only knowledgeable and caring, but extremely articulate about those two things. And so we're very pleased today to have Wade talk, and you will find out when he starts talking about these wonderful historic trees. What a caring person he is about nature and his knowledge and ability to talk about it. So Wade, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ray.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Ray's really going to love this presentation because this presentation is about history.
Right.
That's what it is. It's history. It's a lot of history. And it's history being told to us by living witnesses. And those living witnesses are trees. Trees that were documented from the time of that significant part of history happening to the present. And stories told of those trees that were passed down through all the generations. And those trees, the ones I'm going to be showing you, not all of them are alive. Many of them are gone. But the opportunity to hear their story is still there, especially those that are gone. They've been marked. It's been identified where they were at. And many of these trees I've been in. I was talking to my buddy Jack here. He's been in one of them. I mean, you probably know where some of these trees are that we're going to talk about. Now, I am referencing my treasure. This is my treasure. I was given this book. This book is called Famous Trees of Texas. And I was given this book back in 1989. I did a presentation on tree diseases. And at that time, that's when oak wilt was really rearing up its head. And people were very confused about that fungal disease. And so I gave a presentation that went nearly 3 hours long. And the people that were hosting it gave me this book. Now, here's another important story about this book. You can't find it anymore. This is the 3rd edition. It was produced in March of 1984. And I would tell you, you can search around garage sales, any particular event where maybe they're selling old books, or go to an old bookstore. If you ever find one of these, nab it up, because it's got some incredible history in it told to us by trees. Now, through this presentation today, I will go into a few of these. You have to understand, I think there's 132 trees listed in here, and they're all over the state of Texas. But I'm going to highlight trees I've had personal experience with. I've actually had my hands on them. I've been around them. Yeah, I'm a tree hugger. Yeah, I'm a tree hugger because of the fact that I just love trees. And I have had various experiences with particular trees, and we'll talk about that. When I'm done, I'm going to change gears. Now, I had a presentation on tree diseases, a video presentation that we could have used, but the thing crashed. Welcome to modern technology. It crashed. So we're going to talk about tree diseases, and I'm going to highlight some key problems to keep your eyes and ears open to. And finally, in the end, I think it's appropriate because we're going into fall, and fall is the ideal time to plant trees. I'm going to talk to you about planting trees. And I've got a very good presentation at the very end that features a true professional as she plants these trees. And some of you will recognize her once she ends up on the screen. Glasses, so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, Famous Trees of Texas, as you see up there on the screen. This book, I've told you, is quite a charm. One thing I want to mention about this book is it's on the Texas Forest Service website. You can go to Texas Forest Service and then just do the search, Famous Trees of Texas, and there is a special page in the site just for these, and you can scroll the bottom ribbon and find a tree you want to read about. and read its story, read its history, learn things about it. Now, I'm going to highlight some and talk a little bit about them. I'm going to talk about the Indian marker tree first. Now, does anyone know where the Indian marker tree is? Ray does? Is it 500 miles away, Ray?
No, there's one in my yard.
One in your yard? That's another good thing to think about. There are these marker trees that are scattered in different locations. The one the Forest Service identifies is right behind the Highlander Restaurant in Burnet, Texas. Now,
Was.
yeah, it was, because that's one of them that disappeared. But whole unusual shape appeared to have been the result of a terrible windstorm. It's actually a living memorial to Comanche Indians. It wasn't a windstorm that bent the tree over, the Indian marker tree. The Indian marker tree, as you see there, it looks like it's leaning. And people always say that must have been a really bad storm. No, it was manipulated to that shape for a very reason. The Comanche Indians did that. The Comanches were a migratory people who spent their summers on the high plains of the Panhandle and their winters in Mexico. In the fall, they would pass through central Texas. One of their favorite camping spots was along Hamilton Creek, which flows through the town of Burnet. And that right there, it's a shame we've lost this tree because it did imagine the history it saw, especially when Fort Croghan was being developed. And that tree was there during all that. Fort Croghan was built not very far from, is it loaded?
Laser, if you wanted to.
Okay, thank you. The Indians liked Hamilton Creek, not only for its flow of clear, sweet water, but also for the bountiful native pecan trees which lined its banks. And that gave it an availability for food. They also were able to find flint there, and which was important in knapping and making arrows. So there's a great history with the Indian marker tree. All right, this one is very dear to me. I don't even need a reference for it. I grew up in that tree. I literally grew up in that tree, up in the top of it. I actually got up there, and Jack, I think I even built a tree house up there as a kid. And you know, you weren't supposed to do that. Yeah, yeah. When you look at this tree, you see that large, massive trunk. This tree is located 2 miles north of San Saba on Comanche Springs Road. There's a road that goes back up in there. And it goes up to the old swinging bridge. And as kids, we'd go to the swinging bridge and fish, catch catfish, bring them home. A lot of times we would stop and take our bicycles and lean them against that tree right there. How many of you had a bicycle with a banana seat on it? Yeah, I did too. Well, that banana seat was the perfect height to put your foot right there, climb up in that fork and shimmy up to the top. And one time as a kid, my brother just started screaming. He was over on this side and I was over here. And I kept asking him, what's wrong? And finally I could hear it. He had an encounter with a raccoon, and the raccoon wanted to go where he was. And I think little brother was just wanting to go somewhere. So and he was back off over in here. And I do remember he seemed to shimmy back. And I think about right there, he fell out of the tree. Well, that was the end of the afternoon for us because he fell out of the tree. You know, back in that day and time, you know, kids were made indestructible. I got him up, his breath was knocked out of him, his nose was bleeding. And I kind of shook him up a little bit, said, come on, shake it off. And he got up and got on his bicycle. And we went on about our business the rest of the day. Probably had a concussion and didn't even know it. But, you know, that was just the way us kids are. You know, we just did those crazy, crazy things. But the Matrimony Oak is a site where Indians would go and have rituals. Also, the locals around there would have weddings there. They would have different parties that were there. And as time went by, then the 60s hit and some crazed kids got up in it and used it as a treehouse. So that was the Matrimony Oak. And the important thing about it, we call it, us natives, us locals in San Saba call it the wedding oak. How many of you have heard of the wedding oak wine? Yeah, wedding oak wine. That's where it gets its name. It gets its name from the wedding oak. Now, this last winter, I took my wife out. I wanted her to see this tree. She'd never seen it before. And one large branch on one side had broken out. And somebody had come up with a chainsaw and cut it up in chunks like this. Well, we loaded up a bunch of that. And I've got it stacked in a private hidden place, so Jack won't put it in the fireplace. And it says on the ends of it, wedding oak, do not burn. And one day I'm gonna make something out of all of that.
Wow.
Okay, the San Saba mother pecan. There's a guy back in that day and time, his name was Region. He was the father of the pecan industry, basically, in San Saba County. San Saba is known as the pecan capital of the world. And Region was a scientist. He realized that the best way to make these pecans more productive was to improve their quality and improve the health of the tree. And so he did a lot of work, especially in the area of grafting, where he would take graft wood from this mother pecan tree and go to other sapling trees and graft it so that it could in turn produce the same pecans that came from the mother pecan tree. This tree is down in the riverbed of the San Saba River. And unfortunately, it's about 3/4 laid over on one side. There's very little of it left alive, and that was from a flood. A flood got in there and it met its demise naturally from a flood that just occurred. But that tree probably is responsible for tons of graft wood and things like that that have been distributed throughout the world. Treaty oak. Now, my buddy Jack and I have talked quite a bit about this particular tree. The treaty oak basically was an area where we had treaties signed up with the Comanches and different Indians. Well, that treaty, the treaty oak, was a demarcation of a distance. On one side of it would become Comanche Indian and Karankawa and several other different tribes. And on the other side was all the immigrants that were coming in. Well, all my life, the word treaty has meant what? It's going to get broke. They're going to break the treaty. You know, it's for some reason treaties are made and treaties get broken. And the treaty oak, as a demarcation of where they were at, actually became a center also for various meetings. Groups would gather there. Jack would go and climb up in that tree and play all over that tree. Does anybody know anything close to present about the treaty oak and what happened to it?
There was a lover's quarrel or something, and this guy came and put some poison around there. And if the tree lived, well, his relationship would dwell, be good for that girl. But if it died, the relationship was off. It was a bad situation. He was caught and sentenced to prison for doing that.
That's crazy.
The tree, though.
This crazy guy went under there with a jug of Velpar. Now, that's probably Greek to you, but Velpar is a very, very serious soil active herbicide. And I mean, once it's come in contact with the soil, it's kind of hard to turn the corner of what its actions are going to produce. And with rainfall and other things that occurred, that worked its way into the root system. And many of us remember the stories on the news about the treaty oak and its poisoning and the parts of the tree that were dying. And Jack, we were talking about this earlier. How much of it's left? Maybe just about a quarter of it.
I haven't seen it in a while.
It's very little. There's very little of it left. It was saved, and it was saved. The Forest Service spent a ton of money. They went in there and dug that soil out and replaced the soil, and they did a lot of things. They did some heavy pruning, and about a quarter, maybe a third of that tree is still alive today for those efforts. So it's still out there, the opportunity to see the treaty oak over in Austin, Texas.
And one of our master gardeners was the head of the Park Service in Austin.
Yeah.
And he's the one that organized the recovery.
Yeah, they were, the city park system and all that was working with, there was a team of different organizations and did an excellent job. Courthouse Cedar in Brazos County. Courthouse Cedar, yes.
Why did the guy do that? I didn't know.
It was a lover's quarrel. He was trying to win her back and she realized he was crazy and wasn't going to happen. And so he did his crazy act and then he ended up in prison. Yeah, lover's quarrel. Bad deal. Any other questions?
Where is it in Austin?
Jack, you know where Lamar? Is it Lamar and where the Treaty Oaks at?
It was Baylor and between Fifth and Sixth Street.
Fifth and Sixth Street, yeah, Fifth and Sixth Street. And if you look up your famous trees of Texas online through the Forest Service, there's a map that shows you exactly where to go. The map will take you straight to it. That's the cool thing about the book. It's got a map section in it. Need these so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, Cedar, Brazos County. This particular tree was left when Brazos County began to develop and put their courthouse system up and things like that. This particular tree had seen a lot of different types of meetings, some laws. People would gather there to say goodbye to loved ones who were leaving for war. It was just a gathering point where that's why the courthouse actually ended up there, because it was like, well, they're already meeting right there. We've got to go build this building over there where this tree is. And so you can imagine the farewells that this tree saw as the guys would kiss their girls, friends, their wives, and take off to war. All of the different times. One of the funny stories about this one, I believe it's this tree right here, is the local press who would produce a little paper for the community ran into an ink problem. History repeats itself, right? Because we've had an ink problem, supply and demand. And so the old crier system was used. You understand what the crier system is? Somebody would walk out with a news item and they would read it loud. They would stand up near that tree and read it aloud, and people would get their news that way for a brief period of time. Finally, the presses got to rolling again, and they could come to that tree and pick up the little flyer that has the local news in it. Interesting tree. Here's another jumbo Hollis pecan in San Saba County. This is located literally on the Colorado River where it meets with the San Saba River. Again, this particular variety, this tree was picked out because its pecans were very, very large. And those pecans were used to develop the desirable variety and a variety of different other hybrids that came from that tree. And that tree was estimated to be somewhere in the vicinity of about 150 years old. So there you go, a tree that, again, witnessed a lot of different stuff, survived floods. I mean, this tree has absolutely been through it. And from my understanding, my pecan sources in home country San Saba tell me it is actually still alive, parts of it. Center Oak, Mills County. If you want to go to the very center of the state of Texas, you need to go to Brady, Texas, get on 377 and take off for Brownwood. Now, before you even get very far out of Brady, there's a little community called Mercury. You're going to hang a left there and you're going to drive up about 3 miles, and this tree is going to be off the shoulder out in a pasture. It is the center of the state of Texas. It was picked out. They were doing a lot of geological work at that time. And all the measurements and everything they had, they determined, and they were very accurate, that this tree was literally sitting in the very center of the state of Texas. And it's still there today. It's got some battle wounds from the drought and some other problems, but you can still find the center oak in Mills County. Wow. The muster oak in Fayette County. Notice this tree looks very similar to the one that was over in Brazos County. But the other one was a cedar. This is an oak. The thing about this tree is this tree, you can tell it's pretty gnarly looking. It's had some problems. It's had some branches broken out. It's had a lot of different things happen to it. But once again, in a community, a location that everyone can remember, a site that you know is there, and it will always be there, is the muster oak. And what would happen is our country went through various wars, from Spanish American to World War I to, II. And that's where, again, troops, people who were going to go to war would meet there. They would gather up to get with other particular commanders and stuff, kiss their loved ones goodbye, and take off for war from the muster tree, the muster oak. And it is still there.
Is it diameter as big as it looks?
Yes.
It looks huge.
It is very huge. It's the unfortunate thing is that it had a lot of heart rot, and I'm going to talk about that later on. You see all that scar tissue down here? Yeah. And right there, though, that is where the tree is actually trying to grow over it and close it back in. We'll talk about how that happens in a little bit. But yes, the thing is monstrous. 3 people get together and hold hands just to reach around it. And that's the reason you can imagine someone, look at that tree.
Yeah.
I believe we should be meeting there. Yes, because it's a monster. It's a big tree. So there's something there that you feel when you get to something that old and you lay your hand on its bark. You actually feel. You feel the history. You really do. You actually feel it. Whipping oak, Guadalupe County. Now in Guadalupe County, back in the day, you didn't want to do anything really, really bad because you would be disciplined. And the way you would be disciplined, they would drag you out to that whipping oak tree and tie your hands around on it and take out a bull whip and beat you within an inch of your life. And they literally would beat them just almost to death before they'd let them go. I don't think the history has ever shown any of them ever came back. I don't think they ever went back to Guadalupe County for nothing after they survived that. But it was a sign of that day and time, and I'm going to show you some others of where action was taken, and some of it was not right. There were some innocent people involved, and I'm sure there were some innocent people right here that got drug out and got beat. And I can imagine if you would have killed someone, some of those lower branches out there probably were used for hangman's noose, just to go ahead and hang you instead of beat you. Here's the Hangman's Oak in Bandera County. This is a sad story. This is in Bandera County where it happened, but it started in Williamson County is where the story started. And there was a group of 5 people who absolutely refused to join the Confederate script. They weren't going to join the Confederate Army for nothing. And so they were trying to make their way someplace else and get away. Well, a commander at that time found out about these men and they set out to track them down. They tracked them down. There was a little bit of a battle at first, but then they told him, they said, if you'll come back with us, we'll go to a judge and this judge will determine your fate. And they thought, well, we've not broken a law. Actually, it wasn't a law not to not join the Confederate Army. It wasn't a law at that time. It's just the Confederate Army had ways to convince you to do it. But anyway, what they did is they chased them down. They brought them back in on their way, bringing them back in. They were there in Bandera County and they pitched camp. That night in the camp, it was decided by a few of the soldiers in there, we ought to just hang them anyway. They're traitors. Just hang them anyway. No trial. We don't need no trial. We know what they were doing. We're just going to hang them. Well, their commander just kind of, I'm washing my hands of this. He just kind of walked away from it. He paid dearly for that later, for that little action. And what happened is one at a time, they hoisted him up the tree and hung him. The last one begged them not to hang him. He said, shoot me. So they loaded up a musket rifle and they left the ramrod in it and they shot him with the ramrod. And of course it went through him and sticking out on both sides. But then they hung him too, just to make sure he was dead. So all of this commotion was going on and some people had heard about it. And so here came some other troops and they came in there. It was actually law enforcement, rangers, I believe at that time. And they found one hanging from the tree and they thought it was an arrow. And so they ran back and said, the Comanches are on the rise again and they're killing, they had a massacre out here. Well, it got found out later on, it had nothing to do with the Comanche Indians and what had happened. Time goes by, they're indicted, but guess what? When they indict them to bring them in, including, well, they got the commander, but they indicted the rest of them, the troops that did that. Guess what? They're nowhere to be found. They're gone and they never found them again. And now that tree is sitting there and you see the little fence right here that has a tombstone in it to mark the grave of the 5 gentlemen that died there at that site. And they were innocent people. It just wasn't necessary to have done that. Hangman's Oak. Kyle Hanging Tree had several stories of the same. You see the flat branch that's out there. It's amazing. I understand this tree is still standing. And That tree right there is the old style of where they'd pull you up there on a horseback, put the noose around your neck, pull the horse out from under you and leave you hanging there for a while. And there were a couple of incidents where someone had murdered somebody's kid. I'd have to go find the story and read it. And they had a trial for him, and the judge himself thought that what he had done to that child was so heinous. The judge himself went out there and said, "I'm going to hang him." And the judge did it. So there's a lot of history, and you have to think Texas history. Man, we were a bunch of macabre type guys. Well, we were bad people. Man, we did evil stuff. But some of it was not that evil. Some of it was retribution for something bad that had occurred. The auction oak in Travis County, I think this one's gone. I need to check on that one. Again, I'm going to show you how to go to Forest Service website to look at this book digitally. You can look up the Austin oak in Travis County, but the unique story there is there was, again, some general that was involved with the development of Waterloo. Y'all know what Waterloo is? Austin, Texas. That's what it was. And as he was developing Waterloo, they were going to put the state capitol there. And as, of course, you know, the history goes, state capitals established, it's changed to the name Austin for Stephen F. Austin. And so there we go. Well, at the auction oak, they would sell off plots of land that are now in downtown Austin. I mean, they were selling off these plots. And this particular general was so good at what he was doing, he sold about 95% of them. And he had generated somewhere in the vicinity of around $290,000, which is just enough money to build the Capitol. And so the Capitol was erected as it is to this day, with all the marble that came from right out here and various other places. And that particular tree was then used, of course, to continue to sell off lots for developers, people who wanted to come settle, who wanted to live there. Of course, the property that was right there closest to the river had the highest value. It's kind of like today, if those of us with waterfront property get heavily taxed for owning it. So, you know, but there's a beautiful story in the auction oak of Travis County that tells you about the history and the development.
Is there a location for that one?
Waterloo. Yes, Jack, I'll have to look it up on the map in here. This is the one I'm thinking that was over on Lamar, is where I think it's at. I'll look it up here in a little bit. Memorial Pecan in Austin, Texas is actually a pecan tree that was literally planted in memory of troops that had died in World War II. It was a memorial that one lady who had lost her husband in the war got together with some others, and they managed to get the property secured. It's on the Capitol grounds, and the memorial pecan was planted there. And I believe it's still there at some place there on the grounds of the state capitol. Old evergreen tree in Lee County, another dear tree to me. That particular tree, you see it, there's a church right there behind it. For a period of time, I went to that church when I was the county agent in Lee County, Giddings, Texas. And that old tree is sitting right next to a huge field, which is used to produce grain. And I had read about all of the different Indian tribes and all of the different groups, and even the explorers are documented as being close to this, who they probably saw this big, large tree. And that particular tree in itself, I thought it was so neat. And the history was so rich that I wanted to set up out there just a few feet from it, my grain scale when I was doing the county's grain sorghum test plots. And that's where we would use different varieties of corn and grain sorghum, and we'd find those with the highest yield, and we would do all kinds of data on them and turn around and then recommend particular producers. Here's your corn, here's your grain sorghum. Use this because it's very productive. And I remember having a week that I would go out and weigh grain. It was like a contest, you know, they'd show up with a buggy and we'd measure off a certain amount and weigh it, and then they'd go on their way. And I had a good time. I've had many a sandwich underneath that tree. I would just pack my lunch sometimes when I was making site visits, and I would make it a point to show up there and just go sit underneath that tree. It's the history that I always felt from that tree, because They were talking about Spanish explorers coming by. And you know, you realize I'm sitting right where those hoof prints went, right where they rode right by it. So it's got a really cool history. Again, it's still on the map. You can find it in the Famous Trees of Texas on the Forest Service website and go make a visit at that particular tree. Okay, Famous Trees of Texas. Let's talk about the book real quick. It's this book is featured in a story in 1995 of a gentleman that decided this book isn't available anymore. But you know what? I'm going to take an old antique camera. Augustine Ralph Yanaga has been using vintage cameras, including this 1957 Rolleiflex, to take portraits of famous trees for his book. Now, his book is called, and I don't have a copy of that here, but let's see, I've got some things in here about it, I believe. Yeah, okay, this book's out of print. I've told you all that. There's a reference number. I'll come back to that, and I'm going to give you this website. Ralph, yeah, here we go. Living Witness Historic Trees of Texas. You can probably look that up online. He did have a book produced through the Texas A&M University Press. So that tells me the book is out there. Now, probably what you're going to see, he was using an old antique camera. You're going to see those old trees in black and white. And it's going to be beautiful what you're going to see, the way he did the photography with the shadows and the light and things like that. He spent hours taking pictures of a tree, just a tree. So he spent a lot of time doing that. Famous trees.
Put that website in the chat. Someone was asking for it.
You want to put that in there?
Yeah, I wondered if I could copy it from your sorry.
Yeah, sure. There you go.
I wonder if it'll copy from here though. Oh, no. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna take this then.
Okay.
Thank you.
This particular book, I kept this article. A friend of mine who knew I had this book brought this article to me. Ellis Winkler. Anybody know Ellis Winkler? Ellis had this stored away and he brought it to me. He had been keeping this because, of course, Ellis is like me. The word's rooted in history. I'm a Texas history buff. I love Texas history. I always did. And always do. But that particular story and the story about his efforts to bring this book back to life are at that particular stage at this point right now. Okay. Any other trees that I just wanted to real quick feature that I didn't have in the presentation?
Can I ask you about one here?
Yes.
The one in the old oak? I've heard.
Oh, the old Oak Center. Yeah, that tree is somewhere in the vicinity of about 200 years old.
We heard that it was a hanging tree, was it?
Could have been. Could have been back in that day, yeah, especially with its location that close to the river. I don't know what it was about hanging trees. They were always near bodies of water, creeks, rivers. I don't know what that was about. But yeah, it could have been. It very much could have been. What amazes me about the oak, she's talking about the oak tree at the Oak Center on Marble Falls, which is over where City Hall is, kind of back in there. How many of you know where Hardin Corona restaurant is? I mean, that's the only place I eat, period. I just eat there all the time. So it's just right up the street from it in the old Oak Center. And when you go in there, I've always been amazed. I see all the buildings, all the concrete, all the stuff, and that tree is just growing. Now, I'm going to get into tree diseases and I'll cover that aspect of it and we'll talk a little bit about that. But any questions about the history of any other particular tree that you might have had an encounter with?
Your very first slide, I think it was called the Indian marker tree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not questioning or challenging anything you said, but how do they differentiate fact from fable on something like that? That the tree was, manipulated by the, we have a tree like that on our property.
Mhm.
And I love to believe that it's an Indian marker tree. It's a huge oak.
It's possible.
It's very horizontal. The one limb is, its limbs probably this big around and it's horizontal, but how do they determine factually that was an Indian marker tree as opposed to just
One of
every
them,
tree?
one of them locally is during that time, you have to think about where, immigrants were and where they were moving in. And right there in Burnett, Texas, the one thing that pretty much confirms that, which was confirmed by the soldiers at Fort Croghan. The soldiers said they would hang stuff on those trees and it would pull them over. And sometimes it was maybe a deer, and they were down there pulling hide off of it and pulling the thing over. It might not have been an intentional act, but once it was done, they realized, okay, this one's different from all the rest of them. They're all standing, look for the one that's leaning over. That's the one we want to go get.
It's really just a word of mouth, thing.
The truck came from the soldiers.
Document that.
Yeah, the only thing I ever heard about that was they said the story came from the soldiers at Fort Croghan.
But the tree that I have in my yard points to right to where the Colorado River it reaches its narrowest and deepest.
Right.
And that's where the dam is right now, where the intake for the turbines is. And it aims right at that spot, right? If you look down.
And this is also another part of that
Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
So the main point was to aim toward water. Show them where water.
And the Burnett Indian marker pointed at the creek. Now, we drive through Burnett and the creek has been manipulated. It's got banks and it's real wide. Looks like a little river. Well, back in that day and time, that creek was about that wide. It was just water coming from a spring or cutting through there. So they would use marker trees, as Ray's saying, to point where things were at.
You remember that rancher out at Joppa? He had a pointer tree also. At top of Joppa was the name of his ranch.
And there's a place that I would need to go find some details about. It's called Seven Oaks Ranch. Seven Oaks has 7 of them. Why are they all pointing the same direction? Well, the story gets kind of knocked off there because they say, well, it was a storm. They, all of them were subjected to the same straight line winds and it blew them over facing the same direction. But then there's others that are saying, yeah, but why are we finding arrowheads underneath? So they're finding arrowheads there. And so that's just a signal right there that that's probably where they're coming from. To answer your question, we honestly don't know. We can go to folklore or we can get some of the history stuff like Fort Croghan. That might be pretty significant, that information there.
You probably know this way, out at Lady Bird Johnson, Wildfire Center in their Arboretum area, they've got a big circle of famous trees of Texas. And they're taking acorns from the trees and they're planted them and they got little trees growing up in that area from the main tree.
Yeah, and this news article I have right here, it talks about the development of where it is now. It's when they were starting back in the 90s and where it is now. And yeah, they've been bringing them in from different directions, different parts of the state. These trees, you think, well, it's an oak tree. Well, oak trees can look different. Different varieties can look different from others, they can react different. Let's jump over into tree diseases. I think I'm done with this one. I'm going to leave Ralph's Living Witness Historic Trees of Texas. If you haven't written that down, that's another way to get this really cool little publication that he has developed. Okay. Told you when we started that my tree disease presentation crashed. We couldn't load it. So what I'm going to do is just off the top of my head, kind of go through each one of the slides. Diseases that affect particular trees are much like the diseases that affect us. When you're young and you're healthy and everything's working in your way, you don't get very sick. But as we get older, yeah, my last COVID booster nearly killed me. We become more susceptible to the things that are out there that can get you. So we have to be careful and watch what we're doing and watch some of our exposures and things like that. The same thing occurs with these trees. Certain exposures that we subject them to can spread diseases. And the one exposure I want to focus on right now is pruning. You can prune an oak tree. There's not a thing in the world wrong with that. If you do it properly, you're actually helping it. You're making it healthier. You're giving it the ability to fend off other diseases and stuff. To prune a tree and keep it healthy is if I'm an oak tree and these are my branches, Well, I would tell you that if one of them is dead, I would always say, well, cut it back to the closest green that you can find. Well, it could be this joint right here. You could take it off there and sprouts would come off there, or you could go all the way back to the trunk and take the dead branch out. If you see in the center of these branches, they're soft and hollowed out, that's heart rot. And that's a point where moisture can get inside there and make it worse. It can just get a whole lot worse with moisture that gets inside there. This makes these trees weak because there's no heavy heartwood in there, support wood to hold them up. And so what happens is in a big windstorm, they get to moving and they get to swaying. And we're sitting there watching them. And about that time we hear a loud pop and there's a branch on the ground. And that actually, because that weight falling off changed the direction the tree moves. Another one may go. And then finally, hopefully the storm passes by. And so we have a wounded tree. When we go and we look at these wounded trees, this can be a live oak, it can be a post oak. Post oaks are the worst. Post oak is a very brittle tree. It's very easy to break a branch off of a post oak tree because they're so brittle. But once that occurs, what we've got to do is we've got to try to correct the damage. The first step, of course, is safety. You're going to walk in there and look and say, there's nothing from above that's going to get me, because you could be the next target. A branch could fall out. That takes care of you. So you make sure that that is safe. Then what you do is you look at where the tree branch broke out. And again, if it's hollow, well, we've got to go back towards the trunk. You're going to go to the trunk or whatever you're going to go to and remove that branch. Now, if you're into good wood and you've made a nice clean cut right close to the side of that trunk, you're going to have what's called a collar start to form. How many have seen these little donuts up in the trees? Those are called collars. And as the tree heals, cells begin to expand and those collars begin to do what? Close over the wound. It takes 2 or 3 years sometimes for this to happen. Once they've closed over the wound, you may look up there and just see a little bump where that broken branch was 3 years ago. But it sealed itself up and it continued on. Many times we do preventative pruning for these trees. That means that we take a good look at them and say, well, there's a little bit of tip back out here. Those two branches are rubbing on one another. It looks lopsided. Everything's over here. We need some over here. And you try to reshape the tree and put it back together. Once you get that tree reshaped, and it has here it's not balanced, but here it is balanced. So maybe we brought a branch in from down here and we gave it back its balance. It's important that we do that because the tree has to dance with the wind, and dancing with the wind on one leg doesn't seem to cut it. It will fall over. So we make it where it looks like it's dancing with both legs on the ground. And that pruning, by opening up the center and allowing airflow to go through, makes these big old majestic trees more able to take on a bad storm. Boy, we've had some bad ones, haven't we? We've had some really, really bad ones. Okay, let's talk about things that grow on trees. People used to call me and they would say, there's this grayish looking mass on the trunk of my oak tree. What is it? Is it going to kill my tree? Well, that's lichens. Lichens, back in the old days of biology, was Alice algae and Freddie fungus got together and took a lichen to one another. So they're a fungus, cross is what they are. And that particular growth that's on there tells a story about the tree in itself. And that story is that the tree's not growing. The tree is kind of suspended in its state right now. And the reason we know that, because if a tree is growing, it has to change branches. And changing branches means it sloughs bark. Bark falls away, lichens fall with it. So if you're seeing a tree that's solid lichens, that tells you that that tree is under stress. It's not growing. It could be that it's just old. And anything that you could do to probably improve its root system or the top of the tree probably would be merited to do. So I would tell you to do that. Mistletoe, the tree thief. People call all the time, how do I get rid of this mistletoe? Well, you have to cut it out. Now, cutting it out, this is mistletoe on the end of a branch. Coming here and cutting it out doesn't cut it, pardon the pun, because right there, it's just gonna sprout and keep coming back. No, we have to realize that this has a vascular system down under the bark. It's stealing from the tree, it's stealing nutrients and water. That's mistletoe. So that means that if it's here, we probably should cut it back off here to get rid of it, get it all out of there. Now that takes some planning, folks. Remember me talking about the balance of a tree? You got to look at that and say, well, if I'm taking this much in a pile over here, I got to go around here and take that much in a pile over here and try to put some balance to that tree so it can dance. Removing mistletoe is a simple process once you've pruned it out, that if you stay after it for a couple of years, you can probably clean a tree completely up of it. Now, mistletoe affects mesquite trees. It affects elms. It's in pecan trees. I found it in oaks. I mean, it doesn't really matter where it is that it grows. Birds will fly in, they'll pull those little white berries off, they'll fly up on the high line, the trees underneath there, they deposit the seed, it germinates, and there you get mistletoe going again. People have asked me, is there a spray for it? Well, I've been told of a product called Florel, but I researched Florel, and Florel is a growth regulator. It's been used in the fruit industry to try to enhance the size of different fruit and things like that. I actually tried it one time. It's very, very slow to do anything. So I think it's better off just to prune it out. It's a lot easier than going through the process of trying to put some kind of a spray up in a tree to try to knock out the mistletoe.
Mistletoe on a big limb, trunk of the tree. I've heard that you take the mistletoe off and wrap it with black paper so the sunlight doesn't get to that.
That is true.
Effective?
That is true, Jack. Here's why. Mistletoe is like anything else. It's got to have light. Any plant that you take light away from, it's not going to grow. So what would happen is it's sitting in there with stored carbohydrates in its little root system, and it can't use them. It keeps pushing, but there's no sunlight, so nothing comes back. So it literally starves itself to death, is what happens. If you can live with the tree with tar paper around it for, a year or so, I guess that works out pretty good. But yeah, mistletoe is like anything else. Remove water, remove light, it's not going to live. We've done mistletoe. We were trying to think about the presentation. Root rot. Okay, root rot occurs. Here is something that you really need to pay attention to and look. As we speak right now, there's a crew at my place grinding a stump out of the ground this big around. It's a stump from an ash tree that fell on the house in one of the storms. And got to looking at that thing, and I stepped in the center of it, and I sunk to my knee in that stump. That's how rotten it had gotten right there in the center. And that's why the tree was so weak. Pecan trees. We were living in a parsonage in Burnett a few years back, and a storm came, and we had a big pecan tree out front. And I went and I looked out during the storm, and it didn't look right. The front yard looked wrong. Something's wrong. And I stepped out on the porch, and I saw my neighbor's brand new Chevrolet pickup sitting in the driveway. And right here, about a foot from it, was the closest branch to a pecan tree that fell that way. And I looked at that, and I called my neighbor Richard. I said, sorry, buddy, at least it didn't hit your truck. Because that tree, the base of it was just white with mushrooms. And when you see those mushrooms at the base of a tree, you really need to think hard about removal. You really do. You, grandkids, somebody else's kids, the dog, something, if that tree gets the right conditions on it, it'll just pop and fall over. I actually had the experience of standing near one in a pecan orchard one time where I kept hearing this sound. It was a kind of a racketing, popping sound. And 3 trees from me, I looked, and one was leaned like this. And I thought, why is that pecan tree doing it? And about that time, boom, the whole thing let go and fell over. This tree was this big around. And when you went up, the mushrooms all around the base of it had eaten the crown off of it where the roots were and wiped it out. Treatment for that. There is no treatment for that. There's no way to treat that. It's where you watch it, and if it has occurred and it's happening, I strongly encourage you to think about removal. Very, very important. Okay, anybody got any other questions about well, let me cover oak wilt. Yeah, I gotta say something about oak wilt. Oak wilt is a fungal disease. Oak wilt has a nasty name called ceratocystis phagocyria. It is cousin to Dutch elm's disease. It's got a lot of folklore to it about how it got here and what it's doing. It's spread three ways. It is spread three ways. An insect, a beetle, can fly to an infected tree and get his feet all in the dirty little spores and fly back to a healthy tree, land and feed on an area where sap is exposed, a branch broke off, and they can start colonization of the spores right there, and then it can work its way into the rest of the tree. And the tree then begins to suffer from wilt because the fungal disease stops it from moving water. Thus the name wilt, because the tree literally looks like it wilts. The tree exhibits a sign on the leaves of what's called veinal necrosis, and that's where the leaf has this reddish yellow flame looking thing on it. And you're looking at the ground and all of them have that same insignia on them. Yeah, that's oak wilt is what that is. It's spread by beetles. It's spread by a saw. You go in and you prune an unhealthy tree, and then you go to a healthy tree and you don't do your business by cleaning and preparing your equipment. You spread it because it came in on that blade, on that saw. And it's spread by root grafts. And that's the hardest thing to deal with because these trees live in mottes. In other words, there's groups of them. They all have a common root system. One of them gets infected. Guess what happens to the rest of the mott? It's kind of like a little preschool classroom. One of them comes in sick, everybody gets sick. Same thing happens in that mott of trees. They end up sick is what happens with that. So it's diligence in watching that. It's diligence in not pruning anytime from March all the way to November. Prune in the wintertime. If you're going to do any activity underneath an oak tree, like you're going to build a house, change your plans. Don't build your house next to an oak tree. Move away from it. Leave it alone. Oak trees like to be by themselves. I got tickled. There was a little cartoon I saw where this guy walked up and he was looking at this beautiful tree and he was thinking of all the things he could do. And he said, "Tree, what could I help you with today?" And the tree says, "Go away." So, yeah, because he doesn't need anybody to take his leaf litter out from underneath him and put a playground under there. If he's kneeling, oak trees kneel. Their branches go out and they touch the ground and they shoot right back up. If he's kneeling, he's just an old guy. Leave him alone. He's just sitting there kneeling is all he's doing. He's not hurting a thing. It's not hurting him. It's what the tree does. So we've got to learn a lot of these trees, just leave them alone. That helps us with disease control.
What about webworms?
Webworms, webworms like a more softer leaf than an oak leaf. So you don't see many webworms in oak trees, but you do see them in pecan, hackberry. I've seen them in sycamore. Webworms are something that actually build up over time. If we're not getting rain, and we have not been getting rain, two things happen, and especially, and let's talk about the pecan trees. Aphid populations build up in the top, and the webworms have nothing physically beating them off the tree like a heavy rainstorm. So what happens is they begin to colonize and build their little nasty white webs, and then all of a sudden they're all over the tree. And if you don't do something pretty quick, you've got a problem. I live in Meadow Lakes. We have a webworm control committee. Anybody else live in Meadow Lakes? Yeah. And are you a member of it?
No.
Neither am I, because I don't have a pecan tree. Yeah, there's no pecan trees on the lot. So we have oak trees, but they've done an excellent job. They really have, because what they do is they use the science. They scout. They get in their golf carts and they drive around and they look and they count and they do everything they need to do. And then they hit what we call economic threshold. And that's when, okay, the population has grown enough. We have to do something. And they activate a spray and it cleans it up. And we don't have another 1998. Do you remember 1998 in Meadow Lakes, Texas? You could drive through Meadow Lakes and it looked like something out of a horror movie. webs everywhere, it looked like spider webs, it was the web worms. And it looked terrible. You went in there and it was, people would tell ghost stories to their kids and the kids would stay in the house. They thought they were actually living in it. So well, the webworm situation is something that we have to address, right? If it's in an area where we've got a lot of trees and we want to protect them, we're probably going to have to use the spray word to try to knock that back out.
What about boars?
Okay, borers can get into softwood trees. Your ashes are susceptible. Your any fruit tree, peach, apple, pecans can get them. Someone asked me one time, they stacked a bunch of mesquite firewood up against an oak tree that they used for barbecue. Well, that borer that's in that mesquite wood doesn't really necessarily have an interest in that oak tree. It's a different borer that does. Now, sometimes if you have a heavy infestation of those, that's where we have to use an insecticide. It's bee friendly, and I like to recommend it. It's called imidacloprid. The trade name is Merit. And Merit won't hurt the bees, and Merit will take care of the borers. And again, that's where I've seen them now. There they are, they're present. I know they're in there. Well, then we got to take action because they're going to come back. If you let them go on, they're going to come back. So what's going to happen?
Pine bark beetle.
The pine bark beetle.
There
Yeah.
were two of them real nice big pine trees up here at the hospital. Hospital here, then right across the lake, at our son's place, there was a nice pine that died the same year.
Yeah.
Was it something came through there?
Yeah, it was probably the pine bark beetle because we had the weather conditions as dry as it's been for the migration of that particular insect to have definitely come through. And you have to think they don't have a lot of pine trees to pick from around here. So the ones that they could find, boy, they picked on them. They picked on them
They're
bad.
not native to this area.
Yeah, they're not native. So that's why they were susceptible. They didn't have other insects that feed on the beetles. So, okay, let me change gears. I'm going to go to tree planting. Yeah, I'll get us out of here. Let's see, I got to find it's over here. Close this one. And can I pull it around this way? Here we go. And let's do this and let's do play from. Your eyes are better than mine. Yeah, that'd be a bitty tiny print even with these. Yeah, if you get that thing fired up. Now this is fun. You'll like this one. There's a star on there that some of you may recognize.
Wait, what about the walnut caterpillar?
Walnut caterpillar, you'll find him on pecan trees. And when you find him, he's there with all of his cousins and uncles and aunts, everybody else. I mean, they cover a whole entire branch. And that particular insect, he's one that we just have to watch for. The fortunate thing, he's external. He's on the trunk of the tree. You can kill him with soapy water. Yeah. I did a little experiment the other day. I like hot sauce. Y'all like hot sauce? Man, it's hot. I found scorpion peppers. Oh my goodness. Scorpion peppers. Well, I put a drop of that in a quart of water and I had some worms that were growing. I went out there and I sprayed those worms with that scorpion pepper sauce. And boy, you talking about doing the Macarena. They were sitting there throwing themselves around. And I came back later and they died. That's probably the most horrible thing to do to any other living creature on this planet, but I killed them.
Well, what's worse, that or some kind of nasty pesticide? At least that's helped. I mean.
Yeah, scorpion pepper worked pretty good. Okay. We're gonna plant a tree. Now, this professional tree planter here, she has selected a native tree that will grow here. She's also known as the world's greatest tree hugger. And we want to select trees that are native, they're adapted to our hill country soils and our climate. And she has a lace bark elm there, a very young lace bark elm, and she's going to demonstrate the proper way to plant this tree. There are a few good trees in your hood. There's the cedar or lace bark elm, the white oaks, such as bur oaks, post oaks, Monterey oaks, even the Texas pistache. My mother has a Texas pistache in her front yard. We call it the pom-pom tree because it's perfectly round. And right now it's become golden yellow. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This is the one time Mom does open all the draperies so that what might see that tree. It's the only time she leaves them open. All right, you need the proper tools to make the job easier. She's using a specific type of spade here that has an extra long handle. She's going to use that rake to kind of try to clean the area up, and she's going to prepare the site for the planting of this tree. All right, when you're going to plant, you need to look around because that tree will look really great right in front of that window. Okay, what's above it? That's the first thing you need to do, look up. If there are power lines anywhere near that tree, don't do it. Because what will happen is that tree over time will grow up and you'll be so proud of it. And you'll come out one day and the utility people are sitting there cutting a hole in the side of your tree because it's in the highlights. So don't subject the tree to that or yourself to it. Just find another location. Avoid planting too close to buildings. What happens there right now, the honeydew situation, I can show you one building that it looks like it has two types of paint on it. Over here is kind of a bright yellow looking paint, and over here is a brownish green looking mess. And what it is just mold and stuff growing on the honeydew that's coming off that tree. So don't do that. Check to make sure where you plant there are no underground power lines, water lines. There's a program called Dig Test. You call it up and they will tell you if there's something in the ground there that you need to be aware of. Okay, well, we're going to make this hole. We're going to dig it really, really ugly. Now that hole, if you look at it, she dug it in the shape of a star. You kind of make that star out right there. The purpose of that is as the roots from her new tree take off, they'll go up in these channels and they'll hit the points where they can take off into the star direction. And that will give the tree a very symmetrical root system in the ground to hold it up and keep it in really, really good shape. So you don't want the tree to have a perfectly round hole. If you dig a perfectly round hole and put a new tree in there and it's been in a container growing in circles, guess what it's going to do in your hole? It's going to grow in circles and it won't take off. You'll have to come in there and you'll have to score the root system, cut it, in other words, to cause it to tiller and then finally take off. It's easier just to dig an ugly hole. All right, inspect your tree before you buy it. You always want to look at the root crown. You want to make sure there's no other damage. You want to make sure that the root ball is very evident in there. Notice there's a certified tree inspector there in that dog. So she knows that she's going to have to lay under that tree. So she wants to approve it. That's where the tree will go. Don't plant too deep. I see people dig holes and they want to get it done and get it done right. And what happens is you put the tree down in the hole and it's like you're looking down in the hole at it. Well, if you were to fill that back in, you're going to cover up those root flares and you're going to cause that tree to struggle to ever get started. Always plant it up a little bit, planning for the fact that it will settle. And so if it's sitting up when you first plant it, probably in a couple of weeks, you'll go out there and notice that it's settled down and leveled off and you're in good shape there. Backfill with only the materials you came out with. I know it's hard to do. People say, well, I want to go get some compost. Now, if you're going to do that, maybe 25% other material, but 75% native local stuff that just came out of the hole. In this case, it was a crushed granite gravel that she dug up right there, and it'll do a great job. Spread mulch over the tree to hold the moisture. Now that the tree's in there, she's spreading a hay mulch around that. She's packing it down and getting it wet. And the key to keeping this tree healthy in the heat of the summer, this one was actually planted last August. The key is to make sure that the moisture stays really good on the root ball of that particular tree. It's very important to do that. Water well and keep watered at least twice a week for a couple of months. The key here, as I said, is that mulch needs to be your friend to help you with that and hold that moisture around the base of the tree where it's needed so bad.
How wide around the tree to put the mulch?
I would put the mulch twice the distance of the height of the tree. So if we're up here 6 feet, well, you need 12, well, it's 6 feet this way, it's 12 feet. But you need 6 feet of mulch out. Yeah, you need a lot of mulch. If you can't do this, you can always hire a real professional. Notice it's pointing at the dog. The dog probably do a better job than.
Which one is the professional?
It's the dog. It's the dog. The dog knows how to plant stuff. So. Okay, any questions?
I planted, about a dozen live oaks that had been, container grown, a couple of years ago, fall of, 20. So they've done real well. Most of them tied them down, et cetera. I'm wondering about, fertilization. Obviously I want them to grow fast, I want them to be, bigger than they are now. Talk to me about fertilization, in terms of timing and materials.
Okay, there's 2 times that we're gonna fertilize. We're gonna give it a winter, we're gonna give it something to put it to winter. In other words, it's gonna go dormant. So we're gonna turn around and make sure that we're using something that's a little higher in phosphorus. And in our part of the world, you need a touch of zinc in it. The best way to get that is probably to use magnesium sulfate or Epsom salt. Just use Epsom salt. So get a fertilizer that you don't want the nitrogen level above 20. It's best if it's 18 or 15, that first number on the bag, but you want that second number to be up there, 20, 22, something like that. And then you can mix probably for the size of the tree you're talking about, a pound of Epsom salt in that mix. Now, you don't need to put it right at the base of the tree. What you need to do is look at that tree and see where the branches are. That's going to tell you where the roots have evidently gotten to. And I'm going to tell you to bore holes in the ground about a foot apart and take that blend that you've got and fill each hole, fill a hole full, and then just lay some mulch over it. You start getting it wet. Now in the spring, it's going to be the opposite. We want that nitrogen number to come up. It's getting warm. There's no threat of hard weather. Moisture you may have to address because if we're not getting any rain then, well, you're going to have to get the hose working. But again, you're going to use one higher in nitrogen. You're going to use something like a 21,714. See, the middle number's lower then. And again, a little magnesium so that we can get that tree in good shape. Some of these trees show iron chlorosis, which is a iron deficiency. There are products out there. One of them came to my mind just the other day. It was Ironite. Ironite needs to be used in the fall. The reason we use iron in the fall is we've got to give it time to get down in the soil profile. If we use it in the spring and the tree's root system's looking for it, can't find it because it's up on top. It just can't get to it. So in the fall, we use iron to make sure we don't get into iron chlorosis. I've got some fruit trees that I will be fertilizing here next month in October. The whole purpose is I'm going in there first with Ironite. I'm going to bore holes and put a cup down in each one around these trees. Their trunks are about this big around. And I'm going to give them their iron shot. Is basically what I'm doing. And then next spring, they're going to get a nitrogen shot. So I'm going to go up to 21% nitrogen and go from there.
So you're an advocate of chemical fertilization versus organic?
You can use organic, but and let's go back to fruit trees. I'm going to be using something commercial for fruit trees simply for the fact because they're put under a large demand and there's nothing wrong with regular fertilizer. For your live oaks and stuff like that, you can use blood meal, bone meal mix with the Epsom salt in it. Blood meal, bone meal mix is you take a 2-pound bag of blood meal, a 2-pound bag of bone meal, and you use about a half of that bag of Epsom salt, mix it in a bucket, go back, bore your holes again, put that material down in there for oak trees. We're not after fruit off them. We're not pressuring them to produce something for us. So that'll be a slower release fertilizer. Regular fertilizer is a salt. There's nothing wrong with using it at all. I use it again in commercial operations, pecan, peach, any type of fruit, any type of nut. We're going to use it for that. That's what we're going to use it for because we really need to help those trees and help them quickly because they're trying to produce us something to eat.
So when you put fertilizer in those holes, it needs rain though.
Yeah, you got to water.
Right?
Yeah, you got to come back and water. You got to pull your mulch over the holes, cover them back up with your mulch, and then you got to get it wet.
You gotta water.
Yeah, it's very important to get it wet.
How deep's your hole?
Now the hole, you want to get down into the root zone. So you want to bore at least anywhere from 8 to 12 inches deep. Yeah, you want to get down like this, because the root system's down here. Now that root system has feeder hair roots that are up in the surface that are gathering water. and stuff like that. But you want to make sure that you've got a column of fertilizer that covers the whole zone. So that when they find it, they're going to put roots in it. They're going to put roots in it and pull it out. They're going to use it at that point.
If you're taking a tree out, can you use that same hole or do you need to remove it?
I don't like to use the same hole where a tree had died, because of all of the different fungal organisms and things that are out there. I think it's best to just move over a couple of feet. And I know that's not a far distance, but unless you want to dig out all that old dead wood, because again, what killed all that wood, what fungus ate it up, what it died from, and then you're going to put fresh, new, young roots right in the middle of it. Be sure and just dig it up real good. Yeah, get all of it out you can get. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. I actually made it in my time allotment, Ray. So
Thank you very much.
sorry, one presentation. We did fine with that.
Thank you. All right. So Shelby will be sending you a evaluation form email. So you can use that. We don't hand them out anymore like we used to. So Wade, thank you so much. That's
You
great.
bet.
Did you get that?
All right.
Any questions?
Get a chance to talk to you.
No, thank you all for being here.
It was great. Thank you.
It's good to see you. I'll see you. Y'all are coming next time.
Sure.
Oh,